Good morning, everyone. We're going to start in a moment. If you could please just let me know through the chat box whether or not the audio is working out for you, because obviously I want to make sure y'all can hear me. Thank you. Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. If just one more person could pipe in, if they hear, just to make sure, we at least got a crowd and it's not, Rachel, the only one that can hear me. Great. Thank you, Amy. All right, guys. Well, certainly please speak up throughout it if there are any issues with the audio. I don't want that to get in the way. Thank you all so much for being here with me this morning to talk about self-care, one of my favorite topics. My name is Nathan Shulman. I am a program specialist with the Tennessee Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. I have been with the coalition since April, loving it. Prior to that, I worked for many, many years for the YWCA of Nashville, Tennessee, in their domestic violence shelter. Working with directly with survivors over the hotline in the shelter initially before moving into supervising staff who were doing that, working with residents in shelter over the hotline. So certainly I have a lot of respect for how difficult any kind of helping professional work can be. And my assumption is that the majority of you would count yourself as, some form of a helping professional. So I get how hard the work is, and for that reason, I have a lot of respect for how important self-care is, and how critical it is, if you're going to do this work in a way that is healthy for you, which in turn makes the work healthy for those you're helping. As well with me today, I have my colleague Megan Batista, who has graciously offered to keep track of any questions that might come up. So certainly at the end, there should definitely be time to answer any questions, have any kind of a back and forth discussion if you'd like to. So please feel free. You're welcome to wait till the end, but we are keeping an eye on that. So even if I don't acknowledge in the moment that you've sent it in, we're hopefully going to grab it and we can adjust it at the end. So thanks, everyone. So something to know about this presentation. Besides the fact that it's going to have a lot of dogs in it, that went too far. Besides the fact that it's going to have a lot of dogs in it, because in my mind, there's few things better for self-care than pups, is that I'm not going to sit here and tell you what kind of self-care you should be doing, because that would be a waste of everyone's time, because self-care is as personal as it gets. So you probably know, certainly better than I do, what self-care works for you. So rather than going into those nitty-gritties, we're going to be talking more about fundamentals. We're going to be talking about philosophies. We're going to be talking about why self-care is so important, really kind of laying out the details of vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout, those things that absolutely can, influence helping professional work and make it more difficult. And then we're going to talk about self-care. So again, I'm not going to list off a zillion different activities, hoping that one of them makes sense for you as self-care. We're going to be talking more about the fundamentals behind self-care, the types of self-care, what it does for you. So my hope is that, from that, it'll either affirm or give you ideas for going about figuring out your self-care plan. And then we're going to talk about prevention of burnout. So obviously, on a singular level, self-care, is the way to prevent burnout. But there absolutely are strategies that you can approach with both your peers, your supervisor, even looking at your organization as a whole to prevent burnout. So we're going to be covering all that and anything else you want to discuss today. More dogs. I really like this quote a lot. It's the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. And I like this quote a lot and feel it's a really important reminder. Because advocates, we often consciously or not adopt a superhero persona when our professional responsibility is to help others in need, which makes sense because advocacy work requires a lot of individual strength and passion. Our clients certainly know this and will often lean on us for all we're worth. But at the same time, it is never their responsibility to keep an eye on how you're doing personally, whether you're needing a break or pick me up. It's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to us. And that can be a tall order given how hectic and overwhelming advocacy work can get, and that's before you even introduce the high stakes decisions that can accompany processes like case management or safety planning. So if I can only emphasize one lesson today, it's the understanding and acceptance that vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, even burnout are inevitable symptoms of doing this work. And it doesn't mean you're bad at your job or in the wrong field. You've been affected, aka you're a human with a heart, which is not a bad thing. So in turn, you need to take the time and steps to process, recover, and if an experience kind of shook you up, really take stock of what it means to you. We didn't get into this work for fame and money, so at the very least, we can allow ourselves this luxury. So kind of breaking down, trauma, what makes an event traumatic? It's likely going to involve a threat, real or perceived, to one's physical or emotional well-being. It'll be overwhelming. It can result in intense feelings of fear and lack of control, which can in turn leave one feeling helpless. And it changes the way a person understands the world, themselves, and others. And that's an important thing to understand about trauma, is that even as you recover from it, even as you grow stronger from recovering it, it's not uncommon for it to change something about how the way you look at yourself, look at the world, look at others. And that's part of the process, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So if that's what makes an event traumatic, you can probably guess what vicarious trauma is. It's that emotional residue, that exposure that we as helping professionals, whether you're an advocate, a counselor, a case manager, that we get from working with people as we're hearing their traumatic stories, as they are sharing with us their pain, their fear. And it makes sense that it's going to stick with you, because we know that largely survivors of traumatic experiences, when they are recounting a traumatic experience, to an extent, they are often, reliving it. So assuming that you are, and I'm assuming you all are, a compassionate, tuned in advocate, case manager, whatnot, you're really listening to them, and you're getting far more than a clinical police report, of an encounter, of an experience. You're getting all of their personal context. They're sharing those things that are very human, that might stick with you in a way that something else might not. What they were wearing that night, what they smelled when something was happening. It's very human. So you're gonna walk away, if you're really invested in helping this person and listening to this person. You're likely gonna walk away with some of that still on you, in your head. And again, that's okay. It's what you do after the fact that determines the healthiness of your work. And I think this flowchart does a really great job of laying out that reality. If you work with those exposed to trauma, you're going to experience that vicariously on at least some level, which is going to have an effect on your person and how you look at things. Do I look at the issue of gender and power and control differently after 6+ years in domestic violence? Of course, how can I not? And I'm betting that your experience doing the work you do has given you some extra or different perspectives than those outside, that field. And that perspective is a skill set, 110%. But if you don't face these changes head on and recognize why they're happening and what it means, it can be extremely disorienting, confusing, even difficult. And this change is going to occur as you simultaneously respond to the vicarious trauma in your work. A neutral response is certainly possible. You get familiar with the work, you start finding rhythms, you develop that emotional shielding that your friends who say, I don't know how you can do this work, marvel at. But because you're an engaged human with a passionate heart, you should expect the good and the bad that can come from vicarious trauma. Now, looking at some of the negative effects of vicarious trauma, one of the most classic ones is either overly involved in or overly avoidant of client needs. It's either you are waking your client up and going, come on, we're losing daylight, or you are just dreading that phone call, even if your client's doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, even if you're supposed to be picking it up and helping, even if you want to, but you just, something about it, you want to avoid, and it just doesn't feel like maybe it did in the past when you were working with that person. Hypervigilance and fear is a common effect of vicarious trauma. And that one can be tricky to parse out, because for a lot of us, depending on what you do, hypervigilance has its place. If you are working in a confidential shelter, if you are doing home visits, if you are working with a known abuser or someone that you know has violent tendencies, that hypervigilance might very well be part of your professional toolbox. And I'm not at all suggesting that you should, you know, take that out if it's keeping you safe, if it's what you're supposed to be doing. It's a matter of, can you turn it off? You know, when you leave work at night, are you able to relax and take off that extrasensory, you know, awareness? So that's a distinction there. You know, overwhelming feelings of helplessness or loss, or intrusive thoughts, images, nightmares from client stories. That pretty well sums up, you know, that residue, that emotional residue that can come from working with those that have experienced trauma. And lastly, you know, change in diet, you know, sleeping, social habits, self-care habits. And this can be a great one to keep especially an eye on because it's a little less abstract. You know, hypervigilance, that's something that, you know, your subconscious can convince you, no, I'm not, I'm just staring out the window because I want to stare out the window. You know, but like working out, like, when was the last time I ate? What did I eat? How am I sleeping? You know, these are far more, you know, you can quantify them better. And if you're realizing, man, my sleep habits are off, I can't think of the last time I saw my friend, it might be valuable to look at the rest of these and go, huh, you know, is anything else going on here, or is it just an off week? Now, the wonderful plus side to kind of vicariously working with someone through their experience is vicarious resilience, which is certainly my hope you all are feeling right now, rather than the other way. And my hope is that you can always return to this, because this is absolutely what's going to sustain us a lot of the time, you know, as we are doing this difficult work. You know, so it's hopefully, you know, working with those in trauma, working with those that have experienced real hardship, is going to give you greater perspective and appreciation of your own problems, make you more, you know, optimistic and motivated. You know, and we know that those low moments are really low, but man, the highs are incredible. And my hope is that as well, the work for you is, you know, giving you that increased sense of hope and belief that people can overcome anything. You know, it's all those reasons that we hop into the work. You know, not least profound sense of commitment and finding meaning from that work. I know when I first found the field of domestic violence services, it all clicked. I just knew this is where I want to be. This is what makes sense. And that absolutely has sustained me through, you know, the more difficult times. So my hope is that you're getting all that out of this. And going back to the more difficult things that can come out of doing, you know, a professional helping-oriented service, there is compassion fatigue. And the big distinction between compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma is going to be that vicarious trauma is often going to shift worldviews, shift how you look at things, whereas compassion fatigue is just depletion. It is just you are out of energy, you are out of patience. You know, you find yourself getting angry or irritable early. You know, work isn't doing for you what it used to do in terms of personal satisfaction. You might be hypersensitive both to any critiques of your work, or just, you know, hearing a story that maybe a week before you could hear and be fine might really trigger you and make you upset, you know, the hypersensitivity. A reduced ability to find sympathy and empathy, which, as we all know, is often, you know, the most important tool in our toolbox, you know, is having that sympathy and empathy on hand for extreme situations for those that we only have a working relationship with. And as well, you know, self-destructive behaviors. You know, maybe you go from having a glass of wine a night to a bottle of wine a night. You know, those unhealthy habits that we reach to when we know we're low. And maybe it's giving us a quick comfort, but it's not, you know, in the end, it's not really gonna help us. And when you combine vicarious trauma with compassion fatigue, you can reach that dreaded state of burnout. Now, I'm sure there are multiple definitions, beliefs around what constitutes burnout. I'm not here to knock or challenge any of them, but I personally find it useful to think of burnout as a partnership of vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue, you know, that gets you down and most significantly keeps you down. So we have two scenarios here. Now, they are definitely more lean towards residential work, domestic violence work. Sorry, I talk about what I know, but hopefully if you are in a field that's different, you can still look at this and get something out of it. So in this first scenario, you know, I work in a domestic violence shelter and at times feel incredibly drained and unable to give survivors any more of my time or empathy. You know, that's compassion fatigue in a nutshell. The self-care I get from socializing is limited because I know from my work how many violent, manipulative abusers live in the community. You know, so here, In this scenario, I am clearly depleted and showing signs of compassion fatigue, but my vicarious trauma has negatively shaped my worldview and reduced socializing, which is perhaps what I needed to feel rejuvenated after helping everyone all day. In this second scenario, I'm determined to help my clients get into rehab no matter what, because I need the assistance in getting sober, and this could be their last chance. After a long day of working on this goal, I don't have the time or patience to listen to my partner discuss the specifics of their day. So there are rare exceptions, but normally when an advocate feels they need to get behind the wheel of the client's life and drive, it means that vicarious trauma has blurred the lines of why they're there to help in the first place. The job is to empower your client, not rob them of their own agency. And in this scenario, vicarious trauma has made the stakes of work too overwhelming and difficult to manage, which results in compassion fatigue occurring where I might normally find the day's pick-me-up, in this instance, interacting with a loved one. So essentially you get stuck. Vicarious trauma can negatively affect your larger approach to the day at hand, and an unhealthy approach is especially draining, which results in compassion fatigue. But that then robs the initiative for healthy self-care habits. Now, a common question that comes up with vicarious trauma and burnout and compassion fatigue is, are some people just not meant to do the work? Or if you have a certain XY history, are you going to be more susceptible to these, negative symptoms of working with those in crisis? And the answer is there are risk factors, but you shouldn't let them, define what you can and can't do. We don't want anyone, we don't want any self-fulfilling prophecies going on here. So there are some personal and professional risk factors to being susceptible to vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, burnout. On the personal side, again, your past trauma history and any pre-existing disorders or conditions might make it more difficult, but you don't know until you know. I've worked with advocates in the domestic violence field who are survivors of abuse themselves, and that has hands down made them the passionate, wonderful advocates they are today. It's largely what fuels them. I also know other people that because of their history, they know I couldn't go near it. It'd be too triggering. And there's no wrong or right there. I would just say, if you're not sure, volunteer, dip your toes in. Because again, there's nothing prescribed here. You might surprise yourself. Yeah, you don't know until you know. I will say that, if you are at a younger age, or if you are lacking an adequate support system, which was crucial and crucial part of self-care, the work might be harder. There is something that comes with age and maturity that can make it easier to settle other people's, trauma and crisis. And then lastly, if you've experienced loss in the last year, which makes sense, because, you are only human, you only have so much to give. And if you are depleted by your own loss, it makes sense that you're not going to be able to, give your all to someone else in a professional way who's experienced loss. So again, it's a risk factor, but it's an understandable risk factor. So I wouldn't, again, I'm not trying to shame anyone's approach or their history with this, just something to keep in mind. And then on the professional side, these things can absolutely increase the risk of burnout, but thankfully they're all pretty easy to remedy and get around. So first and foremost, you want to make sure that you are, that you're at the place you're supposed to be at, that you are experienced enough to work there, that the place is the right match for you, and that you've got the right orientation and training coming in. Because there can be a few things more frustrating than knowing that you're not doing a good job, not knowing how to do better, and because in these fields you're likely helping someone else, you're also dealing with the disappointment and anger of someone else. And we know those in anger, and we know those in trauma, understandably, are going to be a little less filtered in the disappointment with you. If you're not doing a good job. So that can absolutely lead to burnout if you, you're going to get down on yourself if you don't have the right tools to do the job the right way. Beyond that, lack of quality supervision, overly high caseload, lack of support system for staff, those can absolutely lead to burnout. So like I said, the plus side is there absolutely are ways to address this, anticipate it, and keep these professional risk factors out of the workplace, which we are going to talk about a little bit later. But it's important to remember you're not alone. This is, like I said, this is absolutely, this is part of the work, not an outlier. We know that between 40 and 85% of helping professionals develop vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, or some kind of high rate of traumatic symptoms. We know social workers, therapists and child welfare workers, they get thrown a lot, and they understandably are going to be affected by it. So really, again, if I can only stress one thing today, is that these are normal symptoms to experience, and there's nothing wrong with experiencing them. It's a matter of how you address it, and addressing it head on and not ignoring it. Brings us to self-care. So self-care is any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. And I use the word deliberately there, because that's a big part of self-care. Hopefully you all in your life are occasionally thrown some awesome surprises, some awesome pick-me-ups, things you don't expect that take care of you. Hopefully you have someone in your life that is actively taking care of you. That's something we all hope to have in life, in whatever context. But self-care means it's on you. So this means that you are deliberately carving out time for yourself. No one else is doing it for you. You're carving out time for yourself, and you're filling it with things that you yourself know are going to rejuvenate you, are going to fill you up. And often that's the biggest hump, is carving out the space, especially when we feel overworked and time feels like a truly precious commodity. There can be something really indulgent, or gluttonous feeling about going, I am taking this time to do whatever I want to do, just for me. But that's really the hump that you got to get over. And once you're over that and you give yourself permission, then it gets easier. Then you get to fill it up with all the activities tailored exactly to you. So if you have a frustrated relationship with self-care, I would just really remind you to think about that first step being one of the most important ones. Just becoming comfortable and giving yourself permission to take care of yourself and carve out that time. Now, I said at the beginning that I'm not going to just list self-care habits, and I'm going to stick to that because, again, that's going to be a waste of everyone's time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the different types of self-care. Generally people think about it, break it up into 5 different categories. Personally, I feel that mixing and matching, variety is a spice of life, or however that expression goes. But again, this is all personal decision. So my hope is, as I'm going through and talking about these, it's giving you ideas about what feels right for you. So looking at types of self-care, there's, cognitive. So any mental exercise that helps you wrap your head around the day and what's in it. It's not necessarily religious or spiritual. It's more along the lines of a self-pep talk. So a common example, if you're having a really rough day with difficult clients or difficult situations, it would be the rationalization and reminder and permission to yourself, that you are not the be-all, end-all of someone's support system. There's more to life than the work you do, however crucial it is. So any kind of rationalization that helps you, okay, I got this, and I only can do what I can do. Verbal, AKA processing. It's identifying and putting to words what you're feeling somehow, in whatever form. So that can be talking things out loud with yourself, a colleague, supervisor, loved one. It can certainly include journaling. It's any method in which you're naming the problem or feeling that you're experiencing. Physical, along with exercise. They can include any activity that uses the 5 sensory functions, such as music and driving. So hey, vacation is probably the ultimate example of that. You are removing yourself entirely from, maybe you're revisiting a favorite place, but often with vacation, you're removing yourself from the normal and giving your senses and your mind a brand new experience. Proper nutrition and hydration would also go in here. But again, it's about finding that balance. Sometimes you need that extra large piece of chocolate cake, and that is fine. Social, recreational. So this is all forms of creative recreational expression. This is probably one of the biggest people think about self-care. It's interacting with friends, and getting all that love and acceptance and companionship that friends and loved ones give you. This really includes spending time, with friends, or art. Appreciating art or creating art, however you define it. Hobbies and volunteer work, shopping, travel, movies. It's all that great stuff. That is just purely recreational entertainment, interacting with others. And then lastly, we have the spiritual, philosophical self-care. So that's where all your faith and value systems are going to come in. In addition to religious services and customs and whatever you follow there. It can also just be, kind of more abstract worldviews about destiny, fate, justice. It's kind of exercising, giving yourself permission to, land where you want to land on these things and learn more about yourself in the process. So again, I think it's important to, to dip into all these and find that balance. But again, I'm not here to tell you what to do, because self-care is your right, and you should go with whatever one or whatever combination of ones is going to rejuvenate you and make you feel taken care of by yourself. So as I said before, we're also going to talk about burnout and preventing burnout, beyond self-care, beyond the individual, and how you can be conscious and prevent these things from creeping in, with your peers, with your supervisor. And the next slide, we're also going to talk about the organization at large. So preventing burnout on a peer level, it's kind of a cliche, but teamwork does make the dream work. I'm sure they're thinking of any other, cliche expression about the importance of teamwork, but there's truth in it. When everyone's picking up a piece of the load, it's easier. We know that being in the helping professionals field, the work never ends, and the work is very intense. So working as a team to split it up is going to make things easier for everyone and do a lot to help prevent that burnout. What also is valuable about that is you are spreading out the emotional responsibility, the emotional weight. If you are working with people in crisis, if the stakes are high, if there is chance for tragedy amongst, the hope for hope, that can be a lot for one person to carry. But if you are part of a larger group handling it, you're spreading out that emotional weight, which will hopefully lead people, to a better acceptance of what happened. If it does turn out to be unfortunate, you're going to hopefully help people move away from that false thinking of, if I had done this, it would have been different. And kind of that vicarious trauma blurred line of I need to do more, I can always do more. If you spread it amongst more people, there's going to be more of a consensus. There's going to be a greater perspective that's hopefully going to keep everyone in a safe, healthy mind frame and help them process any grief, or difficult situations, easier. And then you also want to assume best intentions. I mean, that's one of the side effects of really good teamwork, is that everyone's busy doing their own thing, and you're part of a larger group, and you're hoping that your piece will connect to the other piece that will lead to whatever end goal you're working on as a team. So when a piece gets dropped by someone else, that can be frustrating, obviously. And depending on, where you're at yourself with compassion fatigue, your mood, you might not assume the best attention. Your mind might immediately go to, oh, that person's so lazy, or oh, that person forgot, oh, that person didn't care, all those little ugly thoughts. And I'm not saying that we're all human. We all drop the ball. And sometimes people aren't in the right position. However, assuming best intentions is going to keep those negative thoughts out of your head, and it's going to make your eventual interaction with that colleague a lot easier, because you're coming into it from a place of respect, rather than, pent-up, marinated anger and frustration that maybe you had, which is going to make the conversation easier. And yeah, so that way you're practicing healthy views of your coworkers, while not necessarily carrying around unnecessary frustration if you're not sure that it's warranted. And then we have gossip, which is bad, and I'm not gonna go through a great teacher on you. I know we've all been probably given the gossip speech at one point or another. I believe all of it, and that gossip is corrosive and, does nothing but get in the way. The one thing I want to say about gossip in this training, in the context of the helping professional field, is that gossip can be tricky to parse out sometimes. Because often as advocates, we have access to so much of our clients' history, possibly more than they realize we have, certainly more than you would know about, another person you don't really know that well in your life, maybe even more than you know about a friend. So we have a lot of information, and it's often our job have to talk about these people, hopefully sensibly for the hope, for the purpose of helping them. But that can mean, discussing a lot of details about their life, about their personality, about what's been happening in the day with them. And there can be that fine line that can get blurred, especially if people are burnt out, where, you might start out bringing up the client's situation, to figure out a solution. But if you're not careful, you might find yourself just gossiping about this client, which isn't going to do anything for the client. And it's going to feed an environment where people gossip. So that can absolutely be an accidental entryway into a culture of gossip. Just because we do have to talk about clients, we just want to make sure that we are talking about clients with purpose, for a reason, rather than just to talk about them or to blow off steam by going, did you hear what that person did? Because that's disrespectful to them, and that's going to take you out of the correct advocate mind frame, where we're here to do good, and we're here to help, and and treat everyone with respect. Peer encouraged conflict resolution is really important. I'm a firm believer that if there is conflict, you resolve it, and name it, and get it out in the open and figure it out. And the reason why I frame it as peer encouraged is, I think it's great that everyone does it, but I think conflict resolution and encouraging conflict resolution is especially important for peers to do, because supervisors, we all know it's a supervisor's job to preach, conflict resolution and unity and no gossip, and that voice has a place, and one certainly hopes that it's being spoken, with conviction and is not just lip service. But for some people, especially if someone is feeling burnt out, or experiencing compassion fatigue, which can, certainly fuel cynicism, they might dismiss it as they have to say it. Whereas having a peer, or being the peer to speak up and go, hey, we need to resolve this, can really send a message to the team, because this is a person that is clearly speaking up out of the interests of, their desire to be on a healthy team and make sure everyone else feels healthy, rather than, say, just part of their job description. And then, there's figuring out your relationship with your coworkers. For some, camaraderie can mean everything, and having someone that you can leave work with, go out and get some drinks with, and talk about this work that can be so heavy and so uncomfortable for someone not in the field. I mean, that can give a lot of people life, and that can really absolutely be part of your self-care. For others, they leave work, and they don't want to think about work anymore. And that's okay too. That's a fair boundary. So that might require setting a respectful boundary with a coworker that wants to hang out more outside of work, an exciting look. I really appreciate, interacting with you in work, but when I leave work, I need to put on a different hat, and hopefully they'll understand that, especially if, you're approaching it from a place of respect. Or a combination of the two, like sometimes interacting and having a team party outside of work can be exactly what you need. Sometimes you might want to leave and pretend that you're not employed. It all depends on your mood, and it can go day to day, and it's as personal a decision as can be. And my hope is that, you are working with others that will respect those boundaries. And then on an organizational level, there are certainly a bunch of different things that, directors, supervisors, leaders can do to prevent burnout on their team. Having a clear mission is a big one, making sure that everyone understands why we're doing the work, why they're doing the work. I think that if you can tie it into the larger scope, that can also, help prevent burnout, because people know we have this mission, and this mission is helping this mission, and, kind of keep expanding it out to whatever degree, you want to go to motivate people and help them realize, oh, like this is important, and we're doing this for a reason. Having present and transparent leadership. That's really important for those to know who's in charge, and you give examples of why, oh, that's right, and that's why they should be in charge. And as much as possible, have some transparency, in terms of what's going on in the organization, especially if staff are beginning to pick up on something. Now, I really respect that leaders can't often be totally transparent with all of their staff. And I'm certainly not trying to challenge whatever boundaries you need to have there to have a healthy run organization. I just personally at least think it's important that even if you as a leader can't be totally transparent and name and give the exact details that the staff are wanting, to at least name the feeling. And you know, let staff know, hey, we understand you are, you know, you are upset about this, or you have questions about this, but we understand how it's affecting the work. And while we can't share all the details, we hear it and, you know, and have that conversation, see how you can meet, you know, halfway. You know, the head in the sand approach, going, they're not upset, they're not suspecting anything. That's only going to further enforce amongst, you know, burnt out or disgruntled staff that leadership doesn't care, that they are absent, that it doesn't matter to them what you decide to do with your time. Regularly scheduled supervision. I know that we talked earlier in the risk factors about, you know, improper supervision, and I think having supervision regularly scheduled is one of the best ways to keep it, you know, at its peak effectiveness. So having a standing appointment, you know, every week or every 2 weeks or whatever makes sense for organization, I think is really great, because obviously, you know, there are going to be those times where if you are, you know, if you are a supervisor, there are going to be times where, you know, your staff are going to have to check in between these scheduled supervisions. But, you know, it sends a message to your staff that I know when I'll have time to talk with this person again. So I'll, you know, sort of get them in the habit of collecting everything that any questions they have, anything they want to ask or talk about. And that'll allow them to stay focused in the day, because they know that a time will come that they'll be able to address whatever's on their mind, rather than it being I don't know, you know, because I'm not sure if I'm ever going to talk about this or address this. It can make it really hard to stay in the moment and focusing on whatever is, you know, whatever is at hand. And for a supervisor, it's win-win, because even if there's something to talk about, you know, that gives you a chance, you know, for just a 5-minute chat about, hey, how was your weekend? So certainly having it regularly scheduled as opposed to only when you need to talk, is going to allow for a lot more of those candid moments and kind of build those relationships, and bring in as much of a friendship as you feel you know is professionally acceptable. And as well, if you as a supervisor have to have a difficult conversation, maybe you know, either bad news or disciplinary action, if you have regularly scheduled supervisions, that's going to, you know, when your staff member comes in, they're not going to be immediately on guard like, I'm only called in when something's bad. You know, they're going to come in, it's going to be a familiar setting, it's going to be a familiar relationship, and that's hopefully will give a lot of buy-in to them hearing what you have to say, even if it might be critical of them. Clear understanding of role and how they fit together, pretty self-explanatory, but important. You know, no one wants to feel like they're, you know, busy work, even if it's what you might be craving in the moment. No one really feels good doing busy work. And my guess is, you know, if you are all, you know, in a helping professional field or some kind of advocacy work, busy work is foreign to you. So I'm not trying to say that you're doing busy work, but, you know, even if it feels like busy work, that can be really disheartening. So really kind of having an understanding of, I am doing this and it fits into that, and that person on the hall does this and how it clicks together. You know, having everything fit together so everyone feels like they are part of a team truly, as opposed to just, you know, a staff member that was hired to fill a position. Staff empowerment, you know, pretty self-explanatory, but just making sure that staff feel empowered, you know, entrusted as they develop and are able to be trusted with things. Everyone wants to feel like they're going somewhere, you know, and are picking stuff up. So even if, you know, a staff's salary or job titles isn't changing anytime soon, you know, having an extra task that's exciting to them, to be trusted with something else. Anywhere you can kind of elevate a staff's position, role, as they're comfortable for it, even if you're not bringing in, you know, HR paperwork. And a great way to do that, you know, if you don't have obvious tasks, is professional development, you know, so finding out what they're interested in, and helping them work towards that, you know, in addition to their normal role. So again, even if they are very firmly in place doing the same thing in their job title, they feel like they are still growing and learning, you know, in the organization that they're choosing to be in that moment. And lastly, staff wellness, you know, just treating all your staff like they're humans, recognizing that they are not just advocates, recognizing that they, you know, they have other interests, they have a life, they have their passions, they have their disappointments, they have everything that has nothing at all to do with the job. And just recognizing that, and, you know, really recognizing, you know, that everyone is fully fleshed out 3D, you know, 3-dimensional humans. And in spirit of that, I want to end here by thanking you all for making a difference, because I have no doubts, if you are listening in on this webinar, that you in some way, are playing a role to help others. And any bit of help makes a difference. Even if you're only making a difference for one person, you are changing that one person's world. And my guess is you are reaching far more than one person. So thank you all so much. So that is figured after all those internet dogs. We can end with a photo of my dog. This is Bridget smiling up there in the corner. That is all I have for you all today. However, if you have any questions, I haven't seen any questions pop up. I apologize if I've missed them. I can double check that right now. But certainly, if you don't have questions right now, you're welcome to email me, call me. I'm always happy to have a conversation about self-care or anything else. As well, if you would like additional information about vicarious trauma, self-care, the Office for Victims of Crime have put together this incredible vicarious trauma toolkit. They've graciously offered it up to advocates to pick and choose what they want from it for their own purposes, which is what I did today to an extent. But you can also look at it in its entirety and work with it. So that's the website right there. Again, I would encourage that if you're interested. With that, we are done unless there are any questions. So feel free to throw those in if you have any. And if not, again, thank you so much for being here today. And I hope you are all having a good day with more vicarious resilience than vicarious trauma. And you all have a self-care plan you feel good about. Thank you. Okay, it looks like there are no questions right now, but like I said, you are welcome to reach out to me later for them. As well, if anyone would like a copy of this PowerPoint presentation, I'm happy to email it to you. I believe we are recording this, hopefully I did it correctly, and this will be going up on the Coalition's YouTube page as well. So you will have the ability to look back on it or share with others if you'd like. But thank you all so much and have a good day.